Every morning, the door of the small corner cafe opened at the same time, 8:15. Claire stepped inside quietly, without drawing attention. She wore the same long, faded coat and carried a brown leather bag that had clearly seen better days. Her shoes were clean but old. Her hair was always tied back in a simple bun. Nothing about her looked expensive or special. Claire would walk to the counter, smile at the barista, and order a cup of chamomile tea, same as always. The young barista named Emily would ask. Claire would nod politely and hand over the exact change. Then she'd carry her tea to the small table by the window, where she sat alone and watched the world outside. Some of the other customers had started noticing her. A group of business people who often met there would whisper jokes about the tea lady. One man in a shiny suit once said, "She must be stuck in the past, wearing that coat every day." Others just ignored her, thinking she was just another quiet old woman who didn't have much. But Claire didn't seem to mind. She never looked upset or bothered. She sipped her tea slowly, sometimes reading a small book or writing in a tiny notebook. She would sit there for about an hour and then leave, always with a gentle nod to the staff. What no one knew was that Claire had chosen that cafe for a reason. Years ago, she had walked by it when she was going through a hard time. It had felt warm and calm, and the smell of fresh bread and coffee made her feel safe. Now, even though her life had changed in big ways, she still liked the quiet comfort it gave her. People often judged her by how she looked. Some assumed she was lonely or poor. They didn't know that Claire had traveled the world, or that she had studied at top universities. They didn't know she owned properties across the city, or that she was one of the biggest investors in several local businesses, including that very cafe. Claire didn't dress to impress. She didn't speak loudly or show off. She believed that real value wasn't about what people wore or how much money they spent. It was about how they treated others, especially when they thought no one important was watching. Every morning, as she sat by the window with her tea, Claire quietly watched, not just the people on the street, but the way others acted in the cafe. She listened to how the staff were treated. She noticed who said thank you and who didn't. Claire was not just passing time. She was learning, and soon, the people who looked down on her would realize just how wrong they had been. One cloudy morning, Claire arrived at the cafe just like she always did. She ordered her tea and took her usual seat by the window. Today, the cafe was a little louder than usual. A woman in high heels and a bright red coat was talking on the phone near the counter. Her voice was sharp and confident. "I told him, if he can't offer at least $6 million, don't waste my time," she said loudly, holding her tablet in one hand. Some people glanced at her, impressed by her bold tone. Claire, sitting nearby, listened quietly as she stirred her tea. The woman's name was Lindsay. She worked in real estate and was known for selling expensive homes in the city. She came to the cafe often between meetings, always dressed in expensive clothes and checking emails on her tablet. She didn't speak to the staff unless she needed something quickly. She rarely noticed anyone who didn't look important. After finishing her call, Lindsay looked around the cafe. Her eyes met Claire's for a moment. Claire gave her a polite smile. "Excuse me," Claire said softly. "Are you a real estate agent?" Lindsay looked her up and down before answering. "Yes, I am," she replied, her voice polite, but distant. "I saw a listing in the window of your office yesterday," Claire said. "It was a small building near the river. Is it still available?" Lindsay raised her eyebrows slightly. "You mean the brick one on Elm Street?" Claire nodded. Lindsay hesitated for a moment, then reached into her bag and handed Claire a business card. "It's still available," she said, "but it's a bit high-end, not really a starter property." Claire held the card gently and looked at it. "Thank you," she said. "I'll be in touch." As Claire turned her attention back to her tea, Lindsay walked away, whispering something into her phone and chuckling. She didn't think the woman with the old coat and quiet voice would ever actually buy a place like that. In her mind, Claire was just curious, or maybe even confused. What Lindsay didn't know was that Claire had already done her research. She wasn't asking out of curiosity. She had her eye on several properties across the city, and that brick building was part of a plan she had been working on for years. Claire believed in building things that lasted, quietly, patiently, and without drawing attention. She had no interest in flashy deals or big announcements. She just wanted to create something that would help people, while testing the character of those she worked with. As she finished her tea and stood to leave, Claire glanced at the business card one more time and tucked it into her notebook. The world didn't see her as a serious buyer. Not yet. But things were about to change. A few days after Claire's meeting with Lindsay, she decided to visit a small boutique downtown. The shop was known for its carefully curated selection of clothing and accessories. The window display caught Claire's attention as she passed by. There was a beautiful scarf that looked soft and elegant. It was just the kind of thing she liked. She had been thinking about it for days. Inside the boutique, the soft sound of music played in the background. A young sales assistant, who appeared to be in her 20s, was arranging clothes on a nearby shelf. Claire stepped in, feeling a little out of place. The boutique was filled with expensive-looking items, and the store was mostly empty, except for a few other customers trying on dresses. "Hello," Claire said softly, approaching the counter where the assistant was standing. "I was wondering if I could see the scarf in the window." The assistant barely looked up as she waved a hand towards the display. "It's over there, near the front," she said quickly, her tone a little dismissive. Claire walked over and gently picked up the scarf, running her fingers along the fabric. It was even softer than she had imagined. The price tag, however, made her pause. It was much higher than she expected. The assistant, now noticing Claire was still holding the scarf, walked over and gave her a polite smile. "I can help you with that if you're interested," she said, though it sounded more like an obligation than a real offer. Claire nodded and put the scarf down on the counter. She wasn't sure if she could justify the cost, but she didn't want to leave empty-handed. She looked around for something else, perhaps something more affordable. "Are you looking for something special?" the assistant asked, her tone slightly colder now. Claire didn't respond right away, but glanced over at a row of coats. After a few moments, she picked up a simple jacket that looked like it might fit her needs. "This one is nice," Claire said, holding it up for the assistant to see. The assistant gave her a quick look, glancing over Claire's outfit. Nothing fancy, just the same old coat and shoes she always wore. With a small smirk, she said, "I'm not sure that one will suit you. It's a bit exclusive." Claire felt a small pang of embarrassment, but didn't let it show. She smiled politely and nodded. "Thank you, I'll think about it," she said, placing the jacket back on the rack. As she turned to leave, the assistant muttered something under her breath about budget shoppers. Claire's face remained calm, but inside, she couldn't help but wonder how often people judged others based on appearances alone. She had seen this kind of behavior before, where people assumed others didn't belong in certain places. But Claire wasn't bothered by it. She had learned long ago not to let other people's opinions affect her. She knew she didn't need to prove anything to anyone. On her way out, Claire paused for a moment and looked back at the boutique. Someday, she thought, it would be nice to be able to buy anything she wanted without a second thought. But for now, she had other plans. The boutique assistant wouldn't be the last person to make a wrong assumption about her. And soon enough, Claire's quiet approach to life would show them just how wrong they had been. A few weeks after Claire's visit to the boutique, an invitation arrived at her door. It was a delicate gold-embossed card, inviting her to attend a charity gala for a local arts foundation. The gala promised an evening of fine dining, live music, and a chance to support the arts in the community. Claire didn't usually attend such events, but the invitation seemed important. She had been quietly supporting the foundation for years, donating large sums of money without ever making her name public. This was the first time they had reached out to her directly. Claire hesitated for a moment, but decided to go. She pulled out a simple black dress from her wardrobe. Nothing fancy, just something comfortable and elegant. She didn't feel the need to stand out, especially at events like this, where many of the guests would be wealthy business people and socialites. On the night of the gala, Claire arrived at the Grand Hotel where the event was being held. The entrance was lined with marble columns, and the large crystal chandelier sparkled overhead. Inside, the room was filled with people dressed in expensive suits and gowns, laughing and talking loudly as they sipped champagne. Claire stepped inside, her soft black dress barely catching anyone's attention. She made her way to the registration table and was handed a small name tag. Ms. Claire was written on it in neat gold lettering. The staff didn't seem to recognize her, and no one made any effort to greet her as she walked through the crowd. She found a seat near the back of the room, away from the noise and chaos. It was peaceful there, and Claire felt comfortable. A few minutes later, a group of women walked past her table, their laughter echoing through the room. One of them, dressed in a bright red gown, noticed Claire sitting alone. She whispered something to her friends, and they all turned to look at her. They clearly assumed that Claire was just another guest who didn't belong. The woman in the red gown glanced at Claire's simple dress and shook her head, muttering, "I wonder if she's one of the volunteers." Another woman in a sparkling black dress added, "Probably here just to enjoy the free food." They all laughed softly, not realizing that Claire had overheard every word. Claire remained calm, sipping her drink as if nothing had happened. Soon after, the program started. Speeches were given, and the auction began. The room was filled with excitement as people bid on high-priced items, art pieces, luxury vacations, and rare experiences. Claire stayed in the background, watching the event unfold. She wasn't interested in bidding. She wasn't there for the glamour. She was there to support the cause in her own way. As the night went on, Claire's name was called. "We would like to thank one of our most generous supporters, Ms. Claire," the host announced, holding up a microphone. The room fell silent. Some people turned to look at her, surprised. They hadn't realized that Claire was more than just another quiet guest. Claire stood up, her presence unassuming, and walked to the front of the room. She didn't need to say anything. Her donation was enough. The whispers stopped, and the eyes that had once looked down on her now looked with curiosity. They didn't know it yet, but Claire's quiet generosity was about to change the way they saw her. A few days after the gala, the Arts Foundation received a surprise. A large donation arrived in the form of a wire transfer. The director, Mr. Brown, was sitting at his desk when the bank called to confirm the payment. $3 million, the voice on the other end of the phone said, sounding almost as shocked as he was, from an anonymous donor. Mr. Brown sat back in his chair, stunned. This kind of donation was unheard of, especially for a small local foundation like his. He quickly checked the details. The money had come from a holding company based in Geneva, a place known for handling large financial transactions, but there was no name attached to it. Just a simple note in the memo. For the arts. Who would do something like this? Mr. Brown muttered to himself as he leaned back in his chair. The transfer had come just days after the gala, and he remembered Claire's name being mentioned during the event, but he couldn't imagine it was her. Claire had seemed so quiet and unassuming, nothing like the kind of person who would make such a bold move. He quickly called a few board members to let them know about the generous donation. Soon, the news spread across the city. People were buzzing with questions. Who was this mysterious benefactor? Why had they chosen to donate such a large amount to the Arts Foundation? The local newspaper even wrote an article about it, calling it the most significant anonymous gift in the city's history. As the days passed, Claire remained unaware of the stir her donation had caused. She continued her usual routine, visiting the cafe each morning, sipping her tea, and observing the world around her. She didn't need to be in the spotlight. Her goal had always been to help where she could, without anyone knowing it was her. The foundation had already been doing good work, and she was happy to support it from behind the scenes. Meanwhile, Lindsay, the real estate agent, had heard the news. She had been watching the headlines closely, hoping to find more opportunities for her clients. When she saw the article about the mysterious donation, something clicked. She had met a woman at the cafe who seemed to know a lot about properties. Could it be her? She thought. Could Claire, the quiet woman with the old coat, really be the person behind such a large gift? Lindsay couldn't shake the thought. She remembered how Claire had asked about the building on Elm Street. Was it possible that Claire was more than just an average buyer? Could she have the kind of wealth that could lead to such a generous donation? Lindsay decided to do some research. She started checking the records for any properties Claire might have purchased. She was determined to find out who the mysterious donor really was. What she didn't know was that Claire was already one step ahead, and soon Everyone who had doubted her would learn just how wrong they had been. A week after the mysterious donation, Claire received a call from the real estate office. It was from Lindsay, the realtor she had briefly met a while ago. Claire had forgotten about the conversation, but Lindsay's name was now making her curious. The call was unexpected, but Claire answered calmly. "Hello, Ms. Claire." Lindsay's voice was a bit nervous. "I wanted to follow up on our last conversation. I know you were interested in that property on Elm Street. We've had a lot of interest in it, and I thought you might want to take another look." Claire knew this was just business. She had already done the research on the building, but now it seemed like Lindsay was offering to meet her in person. Claire agreed to the meeting, but she had no plans to waste time. She wasn't interested in small talk. The next morning, Claire arrived at the office. The building was sleek and modern, nothing like the quiet cafe where she spent her mornings. She walked through the glass doors, the sound of her footsteps echoing in the lobby. The receptionist greeted her with a smile, and Claire took a seat in the waiting area. Soon, Lindsay appeared, looking as polished and professional as ever. She smiled brightly when she saw Claire. "Miss Claire, thank you for coming. I'm so glad you could make it today." Claire nodded politely, but her face remained neutral. "I'm here to look at the property," she said simply. Lindsay led her to a conference room where they could discuss the details of the building. As Claire listened to Lindsay go over the numbers, she felt calm. Lindsay was explaining the renovations needed, the potential for renting out the units, and the price. But Claire wasn't interested in small details. What she was focused on was how Lindsay spoke to her, how she assumed Claire didn't know much about real estate, how she tried to sell her on the idea of making a quick decision. After a few minutes of listening, Claire finally interrupted. "I'll take it," she said, her voice steady. Lindsay looked surprised. "Are you sure? I mean, it's quite an investment. I just wanted to make sure you were clear on everything." Claire didn't need further explanations. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. "I've already looked into this building," she said, "and I have the funds to buy it. No problem." Lindsay's eyes widened. "Wait, you're serious?" Claire smiled slightly, but there was no humor in it. "Yes, I'm serious. I'm ready to move forward with the purchase." Lindsay's mind raced. How could this quiet woman, who barely spoke a word to anyone, be so confident? How could she have the resources to make such a big investment? But before she could ask any more questions, Claire added, "I also have some other properties I'm interested in. Let's discuss those as well." In that moment, Lindsay realized something. Claire wasn't the simple woman she had assumed. She wasn't just a quiet lady with an old coat. She was a serious businesswoman with a plan. And Claire was about to show her just how wrong she had been to judge her. The power of silence, it seemed, was more than just a way to blend in. It was a way to quietly take control. After the meeting with Lindsay, Claire's presence in the real estate world became undeniable. The deal for the Elm Street property was just the beginning. She moved quickly, acquiring more buildings in the city. She didn't make a big fuss about it. She didn't seek attention or boast about her success. Instead, she kept a low profile, quietly pushing forward with her plans. It wasn't long before people started to notice. Small business owners in the area began to talk about the new properties being renovated. Some of them had already received calls from Claire's team, offering to lease space for their shops or offices. They were surprised by her professionalism, impressed by how clear and straightforward she was in her dealings. She wasn't the typical landlord. Claire made sure the terms of the leases were fair, and she took the time to listen to each business owner's needs. In return, many of them agreed to sign long-term contracts. Meanwhile, the whispers about Claire's wealth and influence only grew louder. Those who had once looked down on her now wondered who she really was. Some speculated that she had inherited a fortune. Others thought she might have made her money from tech investments. But no one knew the full story. Claire didn't care to share it. She wasn't interested in explaining herself to anyone. Her work spoke for itself. One day, Claire sat in a boardroom with a few of her advisors. They were discussing the future of the properties she had acquired and the direction they should take next. The room was filled with people in suits, all looking at her for guidance. Claire, dressed in her usual simple coat, sat at the head of the table, listening carefully to each proposal. A young man, eager to make an impression, spoke up. We could expand further, maybe even invest in some high-end luxury properties. That would put us on the map and attract more affluent tenants." Claire considered his words for a moment, her eyes scanning the room. She didn't rush to respond. Instead, she took her time, thinking about the long-term impact of their choices. After a brief silence, she spoke calmly. "Luxury properties may bring in money, but they don't create lasting value. We should focus on affordable housing and spaces that serve the community. That's where we can make a real difference." There was a pause as the room processed her words. The young man who had spoken looked a little taken aback. He had expected Claire to take the more conventional route, to chase after wealth and status. But Claire wasn't interested in following the crowd. She believed in something more meaningful. She continued, "There are enough luxury developments in the city, but there aren't enough spaces for small businesses, affordable apartments, or community centers. We need to create spaces where people can thrive, not just where they can pay a high rent." Her advisors nodded, impressed by her vision. Claire had a way of seeing things differently, of looking beyond the immediate rewards and focusing on what would make a real positive impact. It was clear now that she wasn't just a quiet woman with a hidden fortune. She was a force to be reckoned with, someone who had the power to change the landscape of the city. As the meeting came to an end, Claire stood up, her decision made. She had set the course. It was time to act. Months passed, and Claire's influence on the city grew stronger. The properties she had acquired, once neglected and overlooked, were now thriving hubs for local businesses and affordable housing. Her vision was coming to life, and people were starting to take notice. The city's skyline was slowly changing, but not in the way most expected. Claire wasn't interested in towering luxury condos or flashy office buildings. Instead, she focused on creating spaces that people actually needed, places that were practical, welcoming, and supportive of the community. The building on Elm Street, the first one she had purchased, was a perfect example. It had been empty for years, a forgotten relic in the heart of the city. But Claire saw potential where others saw a lost cause. She renovated the building with care, making sure to preserve its historic charm, while updating it to meet the needs of modern tenants. Soon, it was filled with small businesses, from local cafes to art studios, and affordable apartments for young families and artists. It became a symbol of what Claire was trying to achieve, change that was both meaningful and lasting. As word spread about her work, other developers took notice. Some began to follow her example, shifting their focus to community-centered projects instead of high-end luxury developments. Others, however, still couldn't quite understand why Claire wasn't chasing after the same flashy deals. But Claire wasn't interested in the spotlight. She knew that true success wasn't about the size of the buildings or the amount of money involved. It was about the positive impact she could have on people's lives. Meanwhile, at the Arts Foundation, the effects of Claire's donation were still being felt. The $3 million she had donated had funded several new programs, from youth art classes to public art installations around the city. The foundation's director, Mr. Brown, was amazed by the difference the money had made. He had never expected someone like Claire to be behind such a significant gift. He had always assumed she was just a quiet woman, content to stay in the background. But now he saw her for what she truly was, a visionary, someone who cared deeply about the future of the city. The local press began to pay more attention to Claire as well. No longer seen as just a mysterious benefactor, she was now recognized as a key figure in the city's growth. Reporters would occasionally catch glimpses of her at community events or press conferences, but she remained humble. She didn't enjoy being in the public eye. Instead, she preferred to focus on her work, on the people she was helping, and on the long-term impact of her investments. One afternoon, Claire stood by a window in one of her newly renovated buildings, looking out over the city. The streets were busy with life, people walking to work, children playing in parks, and shop owners greeting their customers. The city was changing, and Claire had played a key role in that transformation. But as she watched the hustle and bustle below, she knew this was only the beginning. There was still more to do, more communities to support, and more buildings to restore. Claire's quiet ambition had turned into something much bigger than anyone had imagined, and she was just getting started.